Back here on CBS Sports HQ, and then there was one. Only one team in the NFL is still winless, and that honor, if you want to call it an honor, whatever, it belongs to the New York Jets. They could not get it done against Denver in London when the defense showed up, but the offense certainly did it. And they had some company in the no-win category for a little bit, but entering week 7, they are just solo dolo there. There were high expectations for Aaron Glenn to kind of turn things around. It's not working out because somehow the offense just seems to get worse and worse every week. And as mentioned, it kind of hit rock bottom in London. New York had negative passing yards in that game. So this ugly offensive showing is overshadowed by the fact that the defense actually held the Broncos to just 71 yards. Moving along, currently for the NFL draft order, the New York Jets are sitting right there at the top. So we're getting a look at the highest drafted players all time in Jets history. Most recently, Zach Wilson in 2021 drafted 2nd overall, who we thought was going to be, the quarterback of the future. We've said that a lot when talking about the Jets, but now he's Tua Tagovailoa's backup out in Miami. So let's welcome in our draft expert, Ryan Wilson. Ryan, great to see you, my friend. We're going to talk about some teams in this draft and the top targets that they should target here in this upcoming draft. So starting at the top, where the Jets, as of right now, have that #1 overall pick. If it stays that way, what are their options? And we got to think it's got to be quarterback, right?
Hey, Jacqueline, good to see you. Quick Rick Spielman update. I texted on Saturday, said, hey, hope you're doing well. Have not heard back. I was angrier probably than Aaron Glenn and Rick Spielman combined watching that game Sunday morning. That was some of the worst football I could even imagine in my worst moments. And you're right. After watching Justin Fields struggle behind a terrible offensive line that also had a really rough morning in London, they need a quarterback in the worst way. And then the question becomes, which quarterback do they need? Dante Moore got outplayed by Fernando Mendoza last weekend, but he might be a better fit in terms of running for his life as that Jets offensive line currently finds itself. They also need a wide receiver, and Garrett Wilson certainly would attest to that. So if they wanted to trade down in the universe where they're happy with whatever their quarterback situation ends up being prior to the draft, Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State would be a great addition in terms of a big-bodied receiver who could play opposite Garrett Wilson, who was probably the second most frustrated Wilson on Sunday watching that football game.
I love how the analysis for which quarterback fits better when we're considering the Jets O-line is, hey, which quarterback can run for their life better? That just tells you a whole lot. All right, now the Browns, if we look at the current draft order, they're sitting at #2. And how many times have we said this, Ryan? This is a team that could potentially need a quarterback come the draft, despite having like 6 quarterbacks in the QB room at one point this season. So is that the main option, or how do you see it shaking out if they are sitting there at #2?
So first, the good news. They have 2 first-round picks. The bad news, of those 6 quarterbacks in that QB room, none was named Baker Mayfield, who is currently the #1 or #2 MVP candidate in Tampa Bay. So that's a conversation for another time. But here's a guy you can keep your eye on. I mentioned Fernando Mendoza. By the way, Jacqueline, he's 6'5", not 6'7", just something to keep in mind. But he outplayed Dante Moore in Oregon on Saturday and solidified himself as one of the 2 best quarterbacks in this draft class. They also need offensive line help, and not because they haven't drafted offensive linemen, because every single one of those offensive linemen seem to get hurt. They're down to offensive linemen 3 and 4 at many positions there. Spencer Fano, the right tackle out of Utah, is having a great season. And if they want to trade down a little bit and get some wide receiver help, which they also dearly need because they're the two people on that team who have caught the most passes are tight ends. So they need some help. Jerry Jeudy has not been the answer. Cornell Tate is also having a really good season at Ohio State at wide receiver. So you can almost spin the wheel and take someone and you will be much improved. I should say the Browns draft class, they've absolutely crushed it at the non-QB position this year. They just have to figure out the quarterback.
Man, we've said that a million times. Also, shout out to Ryan Wilson for keeping us all hip and cool and young with his 6'7" reference, right? Okay, let's get to the Raiders right now with the #8 pick. So what are some options that they should consider?
Yeah, and you guys were talking about this in the last segment. Geno Smith has not lived up to the Geno Smith we were accustomed to seeing the last few seasons in Seattle. He has regressed, and there are any number of reasons for that. But at the end of the day, they need to find a long-term solution at quarterback. He's in his mid-30s now, and they're going to have some options here. And one of the players to keep an eye on who has had a fantastic season to date, after not playing a lot of football last season, Ty Simpson out of Alabama. He looks like a grizzled veteran, and every time I watch him play, Jacqueline, and this is going to sound like a slight, but it's the biggest compliment because I was a huge Mac Jones fan when he was coming out of Alabama. He's like Matt Jones in terms of his processing ability, but he's a better athlete with a bigger arm. Keep an eye on that. Should they want to go in another direction because Geno magically turns this thing around? Defense would be an obvious choice. Peter Woods, should he be there? The defensive lineman at Clemson would be an easy choice. Even easier choice, Caleb Downs, the all-world safety out of Ohio State, could also be an option there if they don't want to go quarterback.
All right, let's make our way down the board, and we're going to the Rams, who have 2 picks in the first round here, picking at 17 and 22. So what makes sense for them as, Matt Stafford, we know he's not going to be playing all that much longer, but something to consider as well.
Yeah, we keep saying that about Matthew Stafford. He just keeps coming back and playing at an incredibly high level. So assuming that this might be his last year or one of his last years, Garrett Nussmeier. That makes a lot of sense. And the issue with Garrett this season has been the one that plagued him a year ago. He struggles in big moments with making poor decisions. He can absolutely spin it. He's only 6 feet and change, so he's not that big. He's not an incredibly mobile quarterback. But in that system and with Sean McVay and Puka Nacua, when he's healthy, he can absolutely light it up. But he just has to play more consistently, and there's a real chance that he falls to the bottom of round 1, maybe slips into day 2. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it in 200 or so days. Avion Terrell, A.J. Terrell's brother, who had a huge game last night for the Falcons and that went over the Bills, is a really good cornerback. He's going to be vying for CB1. They need cornerbacks in the worst way in Los Angeles. They have a ton of guys whose contracts are up not only after this season, but the subsequent season. So he would make some sense there at the bottom of round 1. But again, they have 2 first-round picks. If they wanted to trade up for a quarterback, they could also consider that.
All right, let's go to your Steelers finally, Ryan, because they're 4-1, but they're picking at 30 as of right now. And not to always go back to the quarterback, but Aaron Rodgers, we're kind of assuming that this is kind of a 1-year rental for him. So with that in mind, what are some options you think that Pittsburgh should target in this upcoming draft?
Yeah, it feels like the Steelers' offense is holding this thing together with chicken wire and duct tape because it's this close from Aaron Rodgers getting absolutely destroyed in that backfield with the way the offensive line's playing. So what would plan B be without Aaron Rodgers next season? One of my favorite players in this draft that we haven't spent much time talking about, although Rand Carthon and I spend some time on the podcast talking about him, Jaden Mayava out of USC. Not a lot of pub. Nevada transfer. Was pretty good last season. He has been really good this year. 6'4", big arm. He can run. They lost that Illinois game 2 weeks ago, but he played at a high level, as did his teammate, wide receiver Mekhi Lemon, who is going to be a first-round pick, barring something unforeseen. He has been electric this season, and they need someone like that opposite DK Metcalf. And finally, if you want to bolster the offensive line is young but has been inconsistent. Caleb Lomu, who is Spencer Fano's partner, plays on the left side at Utah. He could be an option down there late in round 1.
So, Ryan, we just gave you 5 different teams, and there was a quarterback at every single option for all these guys. 5 different quarterbacks. So ultimately, how many QBs do you think go in the first round?
You know what, Jacqueline, this is going to sound crazy. It could be north of that. We still haven't talked about Carson Beck, who's had a resurgence. We're not talking about Arch Manning anymore. Drew Aller got injured, so we have to figure that out. There are several names. Lenore Sellers, who I think should return to school, could be an option as well. I know NFL teams love his athleticism, but he needs to grow as a passer. So we had 6 2 years ago. I will put the over-under, just to be crazy here, in the middle of October at 6.5. That sounds high, but 6 wouldn't shock me as we sit here, just because there's so many talented players. No clear-cut number 1 like a Joe Burrow or, for example, but there are going to be a lot of guys that teams are going to be interested in and potentially interested in with those top 32 picks.
Ryan, you mentioned, hey, we're not talking about Arch Manning anymore. And in the offseason, we were talking about him, potentially being drafted number 1, the Heisman favorite, all the things. Is it too late for him to turn the conversation around where we are talking about him being one of those 5, potentially 6 quarterbacks gone in the first round of this upcoming draft? Or does he need to stay in school?
It is never too late, Jacqueline, when we're talking NFL draft. And look, man, he played okay in the Oklahoma game last weekend. Played certainly much better than John Mateer, another name who could be in the first-round conversation. So never say never. I would just like him to come back, play a little bit more football. That offensive line, especially the interior offensive line for Texas, is not very good. So he has been playing under duress, and that should give you some indication of what it would look like if you went to a bad football team in the NFL. So stay in school, Arch. We don't have to say that so much anymore, but he has the NIL money. He has the Warby Parker money. He has the Manning money. There's no reason to rush it. to the NFL and then play for a team that maybe you don't want to play for because they're not very good.
Come on, Arch. You don't want to be running for your life behind that Jets O-line. You just don't. Stay at Texas. Stay in school. Ryan, we appreciate it. Already talking about the draft. Never too soon here in mid-October. And, of course, the draft talk continues over on the With the First Pick podcast with Ryan Wilson and Rand Carthon. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.